I never thought 5 acres of quiet land could hold so much noise from the past. Every time the wind cuts through these woods, it carries voices I tried for years to forget. My father's sharp commands, my mother's cautious sighs, my sister's perfect laughter. I thought distance would soften them, but standing here, on the property my grandparents left me, they echo louder than ever. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe and like now, then let's get back to the story. My name is Blake Carter and I turned 32 yesterday. I grew up in Connecticut, in one of those postcard-perfect neighborhoods where every lawn was trimmed to regulation height and every family competed over who appeared happiest. My father, Richard Carter, was a corporate attorney who measured success in billable hours and control. My mother, Patricia, taught economics at Yale, a woman who believed life was a formula. You input hard work and output perfection. My sister Olivia, 3 years younger, was living proof that their formula worked. She was the golden child from day one, collecting trophies, degrees, and their unconditional love like it was her birthright. I was the outlier. The artist, the disappointment. My grades were fine, not stellar. My focus was scattered between sketchbooks and camera lenses. Where Olivia saw equations, I saw light. While she rehearsed debate arguments, I was chasing sunsets behind our house. My father called me the wild card, which, in our family, wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. At dinner, achievements were the currency of affection, and I could never afford the exchange rate. The real fracture came senior year. I'd been accepted to both an art school in New York and the law program at Dad's alma mater. Everyone assumed I'd choose law. It wasn't even up for debate, until I said the words that detonated our family's illusion of harmony. I'm going to study photography. My father slammed his palm against the dining table so hard the silverware jumped. No daughter of mine is throwing her future away on a hobby, he said, voice cold and final. My mother tried to smooth it over, but she didn't mean her words any more than he did. We just want what's best for you, she whispered, which really meant, be who we expect you to be. I stood my ground that night for the first time. I'm not going to law school, I said. I'm going to make a life with my camera. The silence that followed felt like a disownment. And it was. If you choose that path, my father said, his tone pure courtroom authority, you choose it alone. We will not pay for it, he kept his promise. My sister went to Harvard fully funded, and I worked 3 jobs to survive art school. I graduated on my own dime, with calloused hands and a heart that still ached for approval I knew would never come. No one from my family showed up at my commencement. The seat I saved for them stayed empty, like a symbol carved into time. Brooklyn was my battlefield after that. A shoebox apartment, a leaking bathroom, endless freelance gigs that barely paid for groceries, but it was mine. I built a career out of scraps and stubbornness. Weddings, headshots, product photos, anything that paid rent. Every click of the shutter was a rebellion against the life I'd been told to want. Years blurred together, defined by exhaustion and quiet victories no one noticed. Every holiday I went home, it was the same script. Olivia was making partner. Olivia was marrying a neurosurgeon. Olivia just bought a penthouse. Meanwhile, I was still finding myself, as my father liked to put it, his tone dripping with pity, disguised as sarcasm. Then came the call that changed everything. My grandmother had passed. My grandfather, only months before her. They were the only ones who ever saw me for who I really was. The only people who came to my exhibitions, who sent handwritten letters with film rolls and notes that said things like, "Keep seeing the world your way." After the funeral, we gathered in the lawyer's office, a family of strained smiles and unspoken resentments. The will was read in a quiet, clinical tone, until the words that froze the room solid. To our granddaughter, Blake Carter, we leave our 5-acre property and farmhouse, trusting she will cherish its beauty as we did. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then I saw it. My father's face turning red, my mother's lips pressed into a razor-thin line, Olivia's perfectly composed mask cracking just enough to reveal shock. They left it to me. The lawyer continued reading, but I didn't hear the rest. All I could think was, why me? Maybe because they saw the parts of me my parents refused to. Maybe because they knew I'd understand the value of something you nurture, not something you buy. Outside, my father cornered me in the hallway, voice low but brimming with fury. "You're going to sell that property," he said. "It's impractical. We'll divide the money among the family." I stared at him, still half in disbelief. "I just need time to think." "There's nothing to think about," he snapped. "Be reasonable for once in your life." But when had I ever been reasonable? That land wasn't just dirt and trees. It was the only thing I'd ever been given freely, without conditions or judgment. I didn't know it yet. But that inheritance, 5 acres of silence, was about to change everything. The first time I set foot on the land that now belonged to me, it felt like stepping into a forgotten photograph. The paint on the old farmhouse was peeling, the porch sagged in one corner, and the once perfect garden had surrendered to weeds. But even beneath the decay, the place breathed, steady, patient, alive. The air smelled like pine and memory. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. I spent hours walking the property, tracing my childhood footsteps, the overgrown apple orchard, the stream where my grandfather taught me to skip stones, the fire pit where my grandmother and I roasted marshmallows under the stars. It was as if the land itself remembered me. I could hear my father's voice in my head even then. "It's impractical. You can't afford it. You'll ruin yourself trying." But his voice didn't matter here. Not anymore. Back in Brooklyn, I couldn't stop thinking about the place. The hum of the city suddenly felt louder, harsher, emptier. I'd been chasing success that no one cared to see. Maybe it was time to build something that didn't need their approval. That's when the call came. My father's number flashing on my screen like a storm warning. "We're having a family meeting," he said. "Be here Saturday. It's important." When I arrived, it felt less like a meeting and more like a trial. My parents sat stiffly on the couch. Olivia and her husband, Daniel, were already there, perfectly poised like they'd rehearsed their roles. I sat across from them, the air heavy with unspoken judgment. My father didn't waste time. "We've discussed the situation with the property," he began. "The market is rising, and the logical thing is to sell. We could all benefit." "By we," I said, "you mean all of you." "Be reasonable," my mother said, in her soft, careful voice, the one she used before delivering a blow. "You live in a small apartment in Brooklyn. How will you maintain 5 acres of land?" Olivia leaned forward, tone dripping with false concern. "We're just trying to help, Blake. You're always struggling financially. This could give you stability." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "And what's my share supposed to be?" My father cleared his throat. "Given that the property itself is already yours, it would only be fair if the proceeds were divided among the rest of us." The room went still. I let the words sink in. The audacity, the entitlement, the sheer arrogance. "So let me get this straight," I said, voice trembling but sharp. "You want me to sell the only thing I've ever been given, and hand the money over to you?" "This is about what's best for the family," my father shot back, his lawyer tone creeping in. "No," I said quietly. "It's about control. It always has been. That broke something in him. You have been nothing but a disappointment since the day you chose that worthless career." He roared, rising to his feet. "We gave you every opportunity, and you threw it away for what? Pictures? While your sister built a real life?" A stunned silence fell. Even Olivia's perfect facade cracked. "A real life?" I repeated. "You mean the one you bought for her?" My mother blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The $560,000 townhouse," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "The one you gave her as a wedding gift, while I was scraping by on 3 jobs. Olivia's face drained of color. Daniel looked at the floor. "That was different," my father said quickly. "Olivia made sensible choices. She earned our support." "No," I said. "She earned your love." I never did. The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to take back. I stood, heart pounding but strangely steady. "I'm not selling the property," I said. "Not now, not ever. It's the only thing in my life that came without conditions." "You're making a mistake," my father warned. "Maybe," I said, heading for the door. "But for once, it'll be my mistake." I didn't look back. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you enjoy this, Hit subscribe and like now. Then let's get back to the story. That night, I drove straight to the farmhouse. I sat on the porch steps in the dark, the crickets humming around me, and whispered to the wind, "Okay? Now what?" 2 years passed before I had an answer. I left Brooklyn, put everything I owned in storage, and moved to the farmhouse full-time. The first winter nearly broke me. Leaking roof, frozen pipes, raccoons in the attic. I learned carpentry through YouTube and plumbing through desperation. I survived on coffee, canned soup, and sheer willpower. But then, something unexpected happened. I started posting my journey online. Photos of the land, the repairs, the small victories. People connected with it. They saw something real in the dirt under my nails and the stories I told through my lens. My following grew. Sponsors reached out. A magazine featured my work. The property that was supposed to be a burden had become my rebirth. Then, one fall afternoon, as I was photographing the orchard, a black SUV pulled up the drive. Olivia stepped out. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, same old perfect life, Blake, she said, eyes wide as she took in the renovated house, the studio barn, the vibrant garden. "You live here now? You actually fixed this place up?" "I do," I said, wiping my hands on my jeans. "And I did," she hesitated, glancing around. "I was driving to a meeting nearby and decided to take a detour. I almost didn't recognize the property." "Right," I said, not believing her for a second. She looked uncomfortable. "You know this land is worth millions now, right? Developers are buying everything around here." Dad thought, "Of course he did." "Blake, listen." "No," I said. "I already did." "For 30 years, her composure wavered. And then something cracked. The mask slipped. Her eyes welled with tears. "You know what's funny?" she said, voice trembling. "You look happy. And I don't even remember what that feels like." I opened my mouth to respond, but she was already pulling out her phone. "Dad," she said, her voice tight. "You won't believe what Blake's done with this place." As her SUV disappeared down the drive, a chill ran through me, because I knew that look in her eyes. And I knew what would come next. They weren't done with me. Not yet. A week after Olivia's visit, I knew something was coming. The air itself felt heavy, like the woods were holding their breath. When the gravel crunched under tires one afternoon, I looked up from my camera expecting a client. But it wasn't a client. It was my entire family. Olivia's SUV led the way, followed by Daniel's sleek rental, and finally my parents' silver sedan. They parked in a perfect judgmental line. For a heartbeat, I thought about pretending I wasn't home, but it was too late. My father was already walking toward the porch, his jaw tight with purpose. "We need to talk," he said. Behind him, my mother looked anxious. Olivia and Daniel hung back, the picture of reluctant allies. Before I could answer, Warren's pickup rumbled up the drive. He climbed out, wiping his hands on his jeans, and gave me a quiet nod. His presence grounded me, a reminder that I wasn't the lost daughter anymore. I was the woman who had built a life from ashes. "Come on in," I said, motioning toward the house. They stepped inside, and for a moment, silence fell. I watched their eyes take in what I had created. The leveled floors, the handmade furniture, the sunlight spilling through wide new windows onto reclaimed wood counters. My mother ran her hand along a finished beam. "You did all this?" she asked softly. "With help," I said, glancing at Warren. My father cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with admiration. "We're here about the property," he said, reverting to his courtroom voice. "The Ridgeline Resort Group has made offers on the surrounding land. They're interested in yours. The value is extraordinary. Millions. And you want me to sell," I said flatly. "It would be a wise decision," he replied. "Fair to distribute the profit among the family." A humorless laugh escaped me. "So we're back to that. Me working, you cashing the check?" "This land appreciated in value through no effort of your own," he snapped. Warren spoke before I could. "That's not true. Blake's worked harder than anyone in this county. Her photography retreats bring visitors from all over. Local businesses thrive because of what she's built." My father turned to him, eyes narrowing. "And who exactly are you?" "Her neighbor," Warren said evenly. "And her friend." The word friend lingered between us, quiet but firm. Olivia suddenly spoke. No one's trying to take anything from you, Blake, but you could start over somewhere else, somewhere better. What problems would it solve for you? I asked, her eyes flickered. Daniel shifted uneasily. It's not relevant, she said, voice brittle. I think it is, I pressed. You mentioned debt. Trouble at work. Is this about money? My mother's eyes darted between us. Olivia, what is she talking about? And that's when the facade finally shattered. The house is underwater, Olivia said, tears brimming. The mortgage, the renovations, the image we built. It's all collapsing. We're drowning. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. The country club, the vacations, the networking, it's all fake. We can't keep up. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The flawless golden girl was gone. In her place was someone human, someone broken. I had no idea, my mother whispered. Of course you didn't, Olivia said bitterly. We've never talked about real things in this family, only about success and appearances. Something inside me softened. I saw it clearly then. She wasn't my rival. She was another casualty of our parents' expectations. I'm not selling, I said quietly. Not for money. Not for pressure. This land is home. It's peace. It's the first thing that ever belonged to me. You're being selfish, my father said, but the fight had drained from his voice. No, I replied. For once I'm being true to myself, and maybe that scares you more than losing any deal. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Warren returned from the garden carrying a basket, fresh eggs, vegetables, a jar of honey. He offered it to my parents with a kind smile. Grown right here, he said. You should take it with you. It was such a simple gesture, but it broke the tension. My mother accepted the basket, her eyes glossy. My father straightened his jacket, avoiding my gaze. When they finally left, Olivia lingered. You were right, she said quietly. All those years I thought you were lost, but maybe you were the only one who found something real. It's never too late, I told her. She smiled through tears. Maybe not. Months passed. Winter blanketed the fields, then melted into spring. Olivia quit her firm. She left Daniel, sold the house, and started over, this time on her own terms. She began working for an environmental nonprofit, using her law degree to protect land instead of destroy it. When she visited me, she wore jeans and hiking boots instead of heels. She laughed more. She breathed. Then, one day, she said, Mom and Dad want to visit. The old dread rose in me, but I agreed. I wanted them to see what I'd built, not to prove them wrong, but to show them who I'd become. When they arrived, the tension was fragile but different. My father moved through the farmhouse in silence, his eyes lingering on every handmade surface, every framed photograph on the walls. My mother asked quiet, genuine questions about the workshops and the garden. In the renovated barn, now my studio, my father stopped before a large photograph. The farmhouse in winter, golden light spilling from its windows. This is remarkable, he said softly. The light tells a story. That's what I try to do, I told him. Tell stories that feel alive. He nodded slowly. I understand now. We ate lunch on the porch. Everything from the land. Fresh bread, garden salad, honey, wine from a local vineyard I'd photographed. For once, conversation flowed easily. No judgments. No comparisons. Finally, my father looked out across the trees. I wouldn't have chosen this life for you, he said. But I see now that you chose well. You built something of real worth. I'm proud of you, Blake. The words hit me harder than I expected. After all these years, that was all I'd ever wanted to hear. That afternoon, as they drove away, Warren slipped his hand into mine. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, watching their car disappear. It's not perfect. But it's a start, he smiled. Beginnings are good. I'm partial to them myself. A year later, I stood on an observation deck overlooking everything I'd built. The farmhouse, the studio, the tiny cabins nestled in the woods, the retreat center by the stream. My photography retreats drew people from across the country now. My book had been published. The land had become more than a home. It was a community. My family visited often. My mother helped design an education program for students. My father even took up photography, of all things. And Olivia? She found her joy again. Sometimes I'd stand outside at dusk and think about my grandparents, about how they'd believed in me before anyone else. Their inheritance wasn't money or property, it was faith. Faith that I could build a life worth living. As fireflies rose from the grass, I realized something else too. Success isn't about approval. It's about peace. It's about waking up each morning knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. I looked out over my land, my camera in hand, the sky awash with color. I wouldn't change any of it, I whispered, not even the hardest parts, because what began as rejection had become freedom. And what I once thought was silence was actually the sound of becoming myself.